Hello and welcome to episode 55 of Pushing Cardboard. War games, history games, political games, we cover them all. I'm recording this June 29th, 2026 in sunny Calgary, Alberta, telling myself it's more important to get this done than mow the lawn. I'm sure my wife will agree. I've decided to try my luck at the border and will be heading to San Diego Hiscon North in Minneapolis in July. I may squeeze in one more episode before then, but if not, look for lots of post-convention content when I get back. My interview today is with Allyn Vannoy, designer of the recently released Traces of Victory from Vuca Games. He's also got more coming in the Traces of series, and it's also designed for World at War and War Diary magazines. If you're a regular listener, you'll remember from last episode how much I enjoyed his Traces of Victory game. Now you get to hear from the man who designed it. Today's game dive is The Far Seas, another game from Vuca, a reprint of a game from S&T magazine in the 1980s. Designed by Martin Anderson, the new edition has all new artwork, of course, and they've also added a dedicated solo system. Okay, before we get started, I'd like to thank everyone who supports the show as a Ko-Fi patron. Your support is very much appreciated. If anyone else out there would like to become a patron via Ko-Fi, it's just like Patreon, just a different company. There's details in the show notes, the newsletter, and on the website. It helps pay for the podcast hosting, the web hosting, and the interview website. So thanks again to all the patrons. Okay, on with the show. We'll have some news, some new arrivals, and general historical gaming chatter, and then we'll get on to the two features. News. As always, there are links to most of these items in the newsletter and the show notes, so check them out. Okay, live cardboard number 34. It was a great one. Mark Herman was my guest, and we did a live teach and play of his game Pacific War. We did the Coral Sea battle scenario and managed to get in naval battles, amphibious landings, search, and of course, carrier strikes. It's on YouTube now and has been very popular after the fact. This was my second teach and play on the live stream, and both were very well received. I think I'll do more as it's a good use of the medium. Some folks show up and watch live and ask questions, and then hundreds of others watch it later and get to learn a few things about the game. The previous live stream, number 33, was also a lot of fun. The topic was games that need more love. We talked about games that flew under the radar or didn't make as big a splash as we expected, or just gems that had been forgotten. You might find a few alike in there, so check it out. Lock and Load designer Sean Drulinger has posted two new resources for his point-blank tactical World War II game. One is a learn-to-play guide, the other is a rules reference. No rules are changed. The rules reference is the rule book reformatted to make it easier to look up rules. So you use the guide to learn to play, and then the reference once you're up and running. Thin Red Line has announced the second game in their C3 series called The Dogs of War. This one is centered on the British Army of the Rhine sector. Apparently, they plan 6 volumes, which could theoretically be linked into one massively unplayable game. I mean, even they call it massively unplayable in their PR. Okay, the GMT newsletter. The big news here, John Krantz is revitalizing Consim Press, now to be called Consim Games. It will aim to publish 2 games per year, and they will be available via GMT's P500 program. So a collaboration, just as it used to be. And finally, in notes about new games coming, Trafalgar Editions is relaunching the crowdfunding for the game Africa Core 41. I don't remember the details, but I think it was originally launched about 18 months ago and it didn't get traction. I remember I had backed it, so of course I got the notice of the new launch, and so I'm just passing the info along to you in hopes that it makes it to its release this time. It looks like an interesting game. What's on the table? Well, I received both Old School Tactical Volume 5, Battle for France, and Modern Tactics Afghanistan last month. Both are by Shane Logan, and the latter is built on the same engine as the Old School Tactical series. So it was fun to get to play them back to back. Old School Tactical was much as you'd expect if you're a fan of the series. It's great to get a little early armor out. I definitely had some kills with anti-tank rifles, something that won't happen much by the time we get to 1941. Modern Tactics was much the same and yet entirely different. Most of the mechanics are the same, but there is such extreme asymmetry between the sides. The Canadians and Americans have all the hardware and training, but they're a bit hamstrung in that they're not allowed to take many losses before retreating. The insurgent player has much weaker units, but more hidden movement, more snipers, IEDs, even suicide bombers. There's also new rules that help the insurgent mask where things are until the coalition player gets close. Oh, and I should also mention the US has choppers, but I didn't get that far in my playing yet. Anyway, I look forward to playing more of this. Old school tactical gets you playing quickly, but it's a very different experience. Overwhelming force versus deception, plus the overwhelming force is very loss averse, much different from the Germans running into the French in 1940 that I tried first. New games to the collection. Well, a handful of things this time. Uh, a few from GMT. Some P500s came in. Curious Regio, the 30 Years War. This looks very interesting. It's got a very lovely cover, but unless you're familiar with either the title, Curious Regio, the Latin there, or iconography of the 30 Years War by the Habsburgs, you might not know what the game's about. But anyway, it is about the 30 Years War. Looks very interesting. Baltic Empires, the Northern Wars of 1558 to 1721. This looks very exciting as well. I'm going to get a chance to play this, I think, at SD Hiscon North in a couple weeks. So I look forward to that. And then finally, also from GMT, The British Way, Enemy of My Enemy. This is an expansion pack for The British Way. Obviously, it adds two new scenarios. They're both sort of prequel scenarios to existing map boards that are already in the game. And then there's a whole bunch of variables and stuff, add-ons. It's actually there's way much, there's a lot more to the package than I thought there was going to be when I ordered it. There's it looks like there's 6 or 12 new ways to play the games that are in that original package with all the stuff that's in this expansion. So I'm really happy I picked that up. I bought a few things from Noble Knight. I've always had my eye on both Downtown Air War over Hanoi and The Burning Blue, both by Lee Brimacombe Wood. They're both really well regarded games, and well, actually, I found these ones. They always go for such high prices that they're on my list at Noble Knight, but I never can quite afford them. But I found a couple of I found them both in private sales and managed to get them. I did though buy some games from Noble Knight, and these were actually these were in shrink still. Mr. Lincoln's War. That's the new packaging of that was two games in one box redone. The Army of the Potomac and the Army of Tennessee. This is kind of a redo and double packaging of two older games by Mark McLaughlin, and then something called the Battles for Quebec. This is a Battles of the Age of Reason series. I don't have any of those games. I've never tried it. I wanted to try it, and so I thought one set in Quebec sounded good to me. And then finally, Vuca sent me a copy of the game I'm going to talk about later today, The Far Seas, German cruiser operations at the outset of World War One. So we'll be talking about that a whole bunch a little later on. Okay, so guess what I'll be doing with these new games? That's right, I'll be figuring out how to store them. Luckily, this episode is sponsored by Cube for Me. They have the best trays, the most versatile trays. Check out my website or newsletter for my link. Use it to order their trays. They'll know I sent you. Not only that, you'll get 5% off your order. And I tell you, they're the best, bar none. Okay, game deep dive time. The Far Seas. This is a reprint of a game by Martin Anderson, originally published in S&T magazine in 1987. The rules for the new version credit Julius Brunken as a co-designer and are apparently largely the same, with the giant addition of a complete solo system added on. Vuca sent me a pre-production copy of this to look at. I thank them. I did a quick unboxing video, so have a look at that if you'd like to see the new deluxe upgraded components. The game is about German cruisers at the outset of World War I. There are 8 of these ships scattered across the globe, mostly in the Pacific, the South Atlantic, and the Indian Oceans. The German player is tasked with using these 8 cruisers and a handful of armed merchant cruisers to protect overseas colonies, capture merchant ships, and to raid Allied stations. The Allied player must try to hunt the 8 cruisers down, as well as capture German overseas colonies, while at the same time protecting their stations, convoys, and merchant shipping. To do this, the Allies have around 60, 70 ships. Uh, it might sound like a mismatch, but in order to hunt down those 8 cruisers, you must first find them. And then once found, you must engage them in battle before they slip away. And neither of those things is as simple as it seems. The map is an area map of the entire world with an obvious focus on the oceans. These oceans are divided up into 32 areas. Each area has a set amount of merchant shipping in it, rated from 1 to 3, as well as scattered ally stations and German colonies. As well, there are shipping routes and coaling stations. The basic game is pretty straightforward, but probably useful only as a way to learn the basic mechanics. The advanced game adds in 4 more rules chunks, none of them big, but they're important, and I think that's probably how the game is meant to be played. There's also some optional rules that can be added in a la carte as you like. The counters are all ships for the most part. They are rated for gunnery range, fire attack modifiers, the less the better, damage capacity, and speed. The German has a log to fill out each turn. There's a small pad of these, but probably meant to be photocopied. The log is for pre-plotting moves and activities, but it's not as simple as that. One of the key nuances in this game is that each turn is divided up into several segments, and the German player can move any or all of their ships that segment, but each ship just moves once per turn. So let's dig into how this works. It's straightforward, but once you start playing, there's way more cat and mouse action going on than you'd think. Envision the map with those 8 German cruisers scattered across it. Most are on their own, though a couple might be paired up in squadrons, or maybe even 3 in a squadron, whatever you like. Squadrons are more powerful, of course, but it means being able to hit less targets. The Allied ships are scattered all across the map as well. The majority are British, but there's a handful of French, a couple Russian, and 15 Japanese, though these must stay somewhat close to Japan. Roughly 2/3 of the Allied ships start on map. A few more enter on turn 2, and there are a few more that can enter only if the Allied player gives up some victory points when they do so. So that's the setup. Each game turn is divided into segments. The rules have a German word for this that I'll undoubtedly mangle. Operation Befehl. I don't know. Anyway, we'll just call them segments. These segments are done when the German has no more ships to move, and that means the turn is over. Each segment starts with the German player secretly writing in their log which ship or ships will move where and what they intend to do when they get there. A ship can only move a single area, so the options aren't huge. As for activities, they list if they're going to raid a station, attack merchant ships or convoys, or intervene versus Allied ships that are trying to capture a colony. They must move at least one ship, but they can move multiple. So the plots are simple, just the area, number moved into, and the action. After the German is done plotting, they place a black pawn on the onboard counter of each ship that is moving. So the Allied player gets to know each segment which ship or ships are going to be active. You'd think that makes it simple for the Allies, but that's not the case. The next phase, the Allied player can move any of their ships that haven't moved yet this turn. So as the Allies, you'll move some ships into the possible areas that you think the German may be going. You'll place these moved ships in set places to defend against station raids or merchant shipping attacks, or just in an area's open water if you just want to try and hunt the possible incoming cruisers. Of course, even with all your ships, you'll not be able to be everywhere protecting everything. Any ships you set to protecting merchants can't also search for cruisers coming in. And any ships you set to protecting stations can't search either, though they will automatically discover any cruiser attacking that station. Every Allied ship that is moved is rotated 90 degrees, as we need to keep track of which ones moved each turn. Once the Allied player has moved all the ships they want to move this segment, the German reveals the log moves and makes them, and then rotates their move ships 90 degrees as well. Anywhere that the German moves into an area where the Allies have just moved into, you mark that area with a red pawn, as there will be search and conflict possibilities there. But here's an important thing to remember. Allied ships that moved into these areas in previous segments can't search or interact. Conversely, an Allied ship that moves into an area where a German ship had moved in a previous segment can also not search for it. When it comes to this searching, only ships that move this segment can search, and they can only search for other ships that move this segment. So it's It's a narrower band than you think. Anyway, you can see it's extra difficult on the Allies when there are two or more cruisers next to each other, but only one of them is moving this segment. How many resources do you send after it, and how many do you hold back in hopes of finding the next one whenever it moves in its segment? Anyway, back to the red pawns. In each area with a pawn, the Allies can now search. If an Allied ship moves to a station that the German was raiding, the search is automatically successful. Those ships come into conflict. More of that later. More often, you're going to have some number of Allied ships searching for a single German ship or a small squadron. Note that the Allies can have their ships solo or in squadrons as well. A search is a simple die roll. On a 1 or less, it's successful. But of course, there are some dice roll modifiers. If the Allies have more than one ship or squadron in the area searching, they get a -1 for each ship or squadron above the first. Note that squadrons count as a single ship for this. When the Allies make squadrons, they increase their firepower for in case they find the German, but they're going to reduce their searching ability because squadrons only count as one. Conversely, there's also a -1 DRM if the German unit is a squadron rather than a single ship. If the Allies locate the German, then they randomly determine which ship or squadron was the one to contact the German ship. So you don't automatically get to contact the German with your biggest squadron. Anyway, at this point, the Allied player has to decide whether to attempt combat or to run away. That's if they find someone. Not likely, but perhaps a small Allied ship finds a big German squadron and they want to run. If the Allied player does run, they're going to have to pay for it in negative victory points or what they call cowardice points. But anyway, usually the Allied player will attempt to engage, and then it's the German who has to stay or run. The Germans mostly going to try to run because they just don't want to risk losing any of those precious 8 cruisers. This is where the ship speeds come into play. If the ship's speeds are equal, there's a 50-50 chance of combat taking place. If one ship is 1 speed grade higher than the other, then the slower ship only has a 1 in 6 chance of catching or escaping the faster ship. If the difference in speeds is 2 or more grades, then the faster ship prevails no matter what. If there are squadrons involved, they can be broken up if the owner wishes. Basically, the running player decides to divide up their squadrons into smaller squadrons or single ships first, and then the chasing player assigns chasing ships to each component, dividing up their squadrons as they like. All squadrons run or chase at the speed of the slowest ship in that squadron. So you resolve these chases, and if any are caught, we move to combat. Combat's a somewhat abstract process, but ship differences still come into play. There's a small battle board on the map, and the involved ships are moved there. There are ranges for each side, A to C, with C being the closest and A being the most distant. The ships all start at A. Each ship has a gunnery range rating that corresponds to these ranges. Most ships are just rated C, meaning they can't fire at all until they're in that close C zone. So we put the ships at A. If any can fire at A range, they do so. If not, we go immediately to B and fire any ships rated for B. And if none there, we go to C, and then everyone can fire. Anyway, so if all ships are rated C, for example, then we just go straight to C. Combat doesn't start until whatever the farthest out range is. So this is important because after each round of combat, all ships move in closer to the next range. However, before that happens, any ships can again attempt to run. So the key thing to remember is that this new attempt to run doesn't happen until there has been at least one actual round of combat. That is, until at least one ship has fired. At each range, combat is simultaneous. Each ship declares a target and rolls a die. From that die roll, they subtract their fire roll modifier. For the majority of ships, this is going to be a big -4, but some of the larger ships, it might be only a -2. Damage is a straightforward chart where most of the results are a number of hits that's 1 less than the final die roll. So if you end up with a final die of 3, you've done 2 hits. Hits are marked, some ships are sunk, and then all ships can try to run again if they like. Any that don't or aren't successful move to the next closer range and fire again. And if they target the same ship as the previous round, they get a +1 DRM. At some point, all of one side will have escaped or sunk. You score victory points for any ships you sank. At that point, all surviving German ships get to repair 1 point of damage, but it's a little more harsh for the Allies. They can remove any damaged ship from the game at this point that they like. The only upside there is the German scores no victory points for these losses, but they must also remove any ships that are over half damaged. Again, no German VPs are awarded, but less ships. If the German manages to win the combat and drive the Allies out of the area, they will then score points for any station they raided. Any German ship that ran or was involved in combat, however, cannot still attack merchant ships. In areas where the Germans weren't discovered and they were attacking merchant shipping, they will score victory points equal to whatever the area merchant ship rating is, less the number of Allied ships defending the merchants. These Allied ships would not be in any of the search and combat action. After all the actions, where there are red pawns have been resolved, all the ships that move this turn are now flipped over to their backs to show they're done for the turn. The only exception here is Allied ships that are protecting merchant shipping. They get to protect the merchant shipping for the rest of the turn. Then it's on to the next segment, starting with the German deciding which cruiser or cruisers to move, just like last time, remembering that the German has to move at least one ship each segment. And then that turn is over when all the German cruisers have moved. There's a victory point track along the bottom of the map, and the German will be racking up points each segment, with 35 to 40 being a draw and anything more or less being a win for one side or the other. And that's the basics. Advanced rules give the Allies the option to try to take over German colonies by assigning ships to specific locations for a set amount of turns. The German can sail in and challenge the Allies, but that will risk losing their ships. On the other hand, the Allied ships that are on colony duty can't be used for anything else until the colony is won or they leave, so less ship for the Allies to hunt cruisers with. Similarly, the Allies have some convoy routes where they can launch convoys. If the convoy makes it to its destination, the Allies get victory points, but the German can also attempt to hunt the ships escorting the convoys. There are a few more nice bits of chrome. Each German cruiser can launch a surprise attack once per game, which gives them a +2 on the first round of combat versus a ship or squadron of their choice that moved in their area. Some ships can fire torpedoes at range C. In the advanced game, the German has to be aware of his coal situation. Some areas let them take on coal freely. Sometimes they need to attack merchant shipping to steal the coal. So there's a lot going on, lots of ways to score, deny victory points. And then on top of this, there's also a new solo system. I haven't tried that out yet, but it looks pretty straightforward. You're the Allies, and a bot system controls the Germans. All the combat and search mechanics look about the same, but obviously German plotting and movement is completely different. Naval games are always intriguing in that they need to find a way to deal with hidden information. It's almost always a somewhat lopsided engagement, so who finds who first is the key to survival. Pre-plotted movement is a popular mechanic going back at least to Wooden Ships and Iron Men, but the Far Seas has a really interesting twist with the way each turn is divided up. Not having to plot every ship at once is interesting, and then having to say which ships are moving but not where is also interesting. With the key being that only ships that were both activated in the same segment can engage. That's what drives the cat and mouse here. The German can move many ships at once and try to force the Allies to gamble on where to defend all at once, but if the Allies put a bunch of ships in the one area and guess correctly, the German is in for a nasty surprise. Or the German can move one by one and force the Allies to always be keeping something in reserve. I've just scratched the surface with this. I'm really keen to see how different players approach it. So far, it really feels fresh and interesting. Anyway, that's The Far Seas by Martin Anderson and Julius Brunken, published by Vuca. Thanks again to Vuca for sending me a copy to have a look at. On to the interview. I first met Allyn Vannoy online when he sent me a copy of his solitaire game Solomon's Campaign 1942-43 from World at War magazine. I'm not much of a solo gamer, but I tried it out and I really liked it. And then I noticed he was designing for Vuca and designing for War Diary magazine. So I called him up to ask him about this explosion of design work. Here's our conversation. Hello, welcome to Pushing Cardboard. I'm here today with designer Allyn Vannoy. How are you, Al? Did I say your name correctly?
You did. I'm fine, thank you.
I first met you just after you designed your first, what I think was your first game, your Solomon's Campaign for, I think it was maybe World at War magazine, and you reached out to me and said, "Hey, you want to have a look at my game?" And even though I'm not much of a solo gamer, I took a look at it and really enjoyed it. I was very appreciative. I'm not a subscriber to. I wasn't a subscriber to World at War, so it might have not come across my plate otherwise.
Okay.
That's where you started designing, I think. But have you been a long time war gamer, or what's your sort of story in the hobby?
I started back in middle school, back in the 60s with Avalon Hill. I still have a copy of 1914 and Panzer Blitz and Jutland, those games. So then I began subscribing to Strategy and Tactics and did that for a number of years. And so,
If you started with 1914, you jumped in at at kind of the big end of that early pool. Those games like D-Day and whatnot were a little easier. That 1914, it was quite the big thing.
yeah, it's a beautiful game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I was a big fan of Panzer Blitz and especially Panzer Leader when I was growing up as well. Those were totally influential games for me because I really started out playing tactical games a lot more. It took me a while before I got to operational games.
Okay.
So you became an S&T guy. Did you kind of, once you got your S&T subscription, did you sort of switch over to being more of an SPI fan and leave Avalon Hill behind, or how did that work?
Yeah, James Dunnigan, the work he and his crew did, I was really infatuated with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt at the time like Avalon Hill was doing the solid, reliable stuff, and SPI was pushing the envelope and sometimes taking big swings with innovative mechanisms in their games and whatnot. And sometimes they didn't work, and then sometimes they did, and they were like a breakthrough in design. So you played you played all this time, but that started in the '60s. You played through high school and college, if you went, I suppose.
A bit, yeah. And then after college, I went to work for the Department of Defense, and so I was away from it, the hobby, for a while. Eventually, went to work for a Beltway Bandit as a systems analyst in Washington, D.C., and eventually came back to the West Coast and worked for Intel till I retired. So COVID brought me back into it.
Oh yeah, I think there's a few people that have that story that they were cooped up in their house and pulled a few old games off the shelf that they hadn't looked at in 20 years or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And I know that Solomon's Campaign was the first game maybe published for you, but had you been tinkering around with designing long before that, or how did that all work?
Not so much. So I've done a lot of writing for military history magazines, for World at War, for War Diary magazine, military. Let's see, the South. That would have been World War II history magazine. So, and I consider myself to have been pretty lucky because in the last few years, I've published well over 100 articles, or these guys have published. So that sort of, got me started back into thinking about it. And then I wondered about games that weren't out there, games that, or themes that hadn't been done that I would like to have seen, or maybe an update of an idea or a game that with a new take on it. So that's sort of my into it.
I talk to a lot of designers, and quite often their entry point is there's a game that they like, but it's not quite right, or there's just there's not a game there's not the game that they want to play on the topic that they're interested in, and so they just make it themselves, and suddenly they're a designer.
Yeah. So essentially, that's what brought me back into it, and I've really enjoyed it, and the people I work with, and the people I meet. In fact, in one of your podcasts recently, you mentioned this small convention in Albany, Oregon. And
right. Yes.
Yeah, I contacted them. They put me in touch. I couldn't find players in my area. I live outside, just west of Portland. And there's a whole group of guys and people that they introduced me to. And I've been getting together with them for the past couple of weeks. So,
fantastic!
Yeah, thanks for that.
I feel like a public service now that I put my mind to where you live. There's a fantastic air museum out there that I've been to.
Uh, yeah, the Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum. I volunteer there 2 days a week.
Oh,
One Sundays I give tours of the Howard Hughes' Spruce Goose, and
yeah,
Wednesdays I work in the
right.
archives.
Yeah, I marveled at this Bruce Goose when I was there. I was there about 5 years ago, I guess, and
Mm,
I just thought it
okay.
was a fantastic, a lucky place that I just kind of happened upon. We were visiting
Yeah.
Portland, and I was looking around for things to do, and there it was. Well, so if you'd already been writing articles for World at War magazine, then you already had an in once you started work on Solomon's campaign to
Mhm.
to pitch it to them. Did you start designing the game before you talked to them about it, or did you talk to them about it and then go, now I'm going to set down to work?
Uh, I wanted to know that I could do a design that they would accept. So I looked at the work they've done, and like with any magazine editor, I try to pitch it to the audience that I assume or presume that they have, and so I do a fair amount of research and background checking this before I pitch an idea.
Right. Well, I thought the game was terrific. I really enjoyed it. I sort of I used to play solitaire games way, what, back when I was in high school and college, and
Hmm.
I didn't have many opponents, and so I played them all the time. And then once I started to play face to face, I kind of left those games behind, and especially once I started doing the podcast and whatnot, I felt like I had to, you know, cut off some of the sides of the hobby so that I could focus on one
Yeah.
thing or another. And so I quit playing solitaire games, but uh, I played yours and I really liked it. And then I played something by David Thompson, who's great at solitaire games as well. And now I go like, maybe I maybe I shouldn't have cut myself off from these games. They're pretty good experiences.
So just a heads up, next year, 4 issue, let's see, about 8 months from now, there'll be a follow-up, the New Guinea campaign based on the same system, but tailored to that whole advance across northern New Guinea coast by MacArthur's army. Yeah,
Fantastic. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, great.
yeah.
Uh,
So,
um, another game that you did is the one for War Diary magazine, a magazine I read religiously as well. Um,
oh, Battle of the
it
Bismarck Sea.
Yeah,
Oh,
I don't have the game. I haven't played the game. Is it out, or is it are
yeah. It's
people? Yeah.
so. Here's the issue we had with that. When Roy was started producing it, I didn't have the chance to look at the rules compared to the player's aid, compared to the map, and there were some disconnects.
Ah,
So we went back and immediately put out a second edition with all the corrections in it. So it's available. In fact, Roy was contacted by a company in Japan, and they wanted 1,000 copies.
oh,
So
nice.
yeah, so that
Yeah.
was a nice bonus. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. I don't have a copy of it, but I was looking at just images that I saw, and the map reminded me a bit of the Solomon's campaign map. I really like
Mhm.
that. I really like the way you laid out the Solomon's campaign. It feels like just about almost everything in the game is around the edges of the map. Like it's the map's in the middle, and there's so many boxes and charts around the
Mhm.
edge. You, I always appreciate a game that keeps my eye on the map and out
Mm,
of the rule
okay.
book and out of charts.
Okay.
Were you trying the same thing with the Battle of the Bismarck Sea?
Well, the Bismarck Sea was a case of the Japanese trying to reinforce their troops in New Guinea, sending convoys from Rabaul to New Guinea. And I did the initial design was just about that one engagement. And then I realized on the US side, or the Allied side, it was a question of from January to March, how their forces evolved and developed their tactics, their aircraft. And so I thought that was a more interesting game. So I expanded it out to include that whole phase. And, you know, But it was fun doing it, and it's trying to find those convoys.
Right. It's funny you're talking about that right now. I just the other night I did a live stream with Mark Herman with his game. He taught me Pacific War sort of in front of people, a live
Oh,
stream, and
uh-huh.
and we were doing the Coral Sea. But there it was. There I am trying to get out of Rabaul and trying to
Hmm.
get at him. It was so I've got the Pacific on my mind these days. When you say you open it up to more than just the one engagement, so that you watched you wanted to include the development and the progression of
Hmm.
tactics and the aircraft over just 3 months. Was there like a significant change in tactics
Oh,
and equipment?
so early in January, the Allied forces intercepted a convoy, but they only sank one ship out of the convoy. And they realized that changes needed to be made in terms of their tactics for attacking ships. They coming in at mast level, um, upgunning their medium bombers, and at the same time being at the end of the pipeline. The Allies were really focused on the Atlantic and Europe. They received very little in terms of support, but they did get P-38 fighter squadrons, which gave them a longer range. So it's you get resource points, the Allies, and how you apply those. Do you want to train? Do you want to add more forces? Um, and then you have to expend those, and then you send out your recon aircraft. You look for those convoys, and once you spot them, you intercept. The original battle was only a 2-day affair. I think the Allied player has to determine, how do I want to apply my resource points to make the best force when I finally find that convoy. And the convoy, there can be multiple convoys.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's a case of you know you'll have enough resources if you apply them in the right manner, basically, and it's
Hmm.
the trick of the game is to figure out exactly what that manner is.
Right.
Uh, I, and I guess you'd written for War Diary before as well, so you knew Roy.
Oh, yeah.
Did he approach you to do the game, or did you approach him?
I approached him, and as a result of that, we're just finishing work on, I think he's about to start production on Ploesti, Operation Tidal Wave, which is we got away from that whole approach. It's a solitaire game, but it's a matter of organizing your B-24 bombers and their groups, and then having to deal with that one single strike, and also determining, is the juice worth the squeeze? In other
Mm,
words, what level of losses am I willing to accept to cause a certain level of damage? So there's two criteria for victory. You know, am I willing to lose 60 planes to knock out 50% of the production capacity?
right,
So, yeah.
because that's the oil fields, right?
That's the refineries
Refineries,
near
yeah.
near
Sorry, yeah,
Bucharest.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's a so you got something else going with both places where you had your initial solitaire games.
Yeah,
You got
yeah. In
kind of got
fact,
follow ups coming.
yeah. In fact, we're starting work on Black Thursday, the Schweinfurt raid, which actually is a series of 4 raids in a 1 week period. The second Schweinfurt raid, the Eighth Air Force lost 60 planes, but during that 1 week, they lost over 100 in 4 missions. So we started work on that, and um, it's an interesting concept. I actually used the game rules and applied artificial intelligence (AI) to see how it would work, and it came back with some interesting results. In that it didn't really change the game, but it added historically things that weren't in the game. So it had to reach out to some historical database and come back with things that I hadn't even thought of.
So it came back with actual historical things that you could verify. It wasn't, because
Right.
every once in a while AI makes things up too when it. So in your case,
Yeah.
it didn't. And this is going to be for War Diary as well,
Yeah. Again, for War Diaries, we're just starting work on it.
right? The stuff that you discovered, or that AI discovered for you, was some of it worthwhile adding into the game?
Yeah. A couple of examples. So when fighter tactics, do you keep your fighters locked onto escort missions, or do you allow them to go after the German fighters? Um, Target degradation. If you hit a target once, should you go back and hit it a second time? So those kind of things. Some other things as well, but those are two of the items.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense, because if that was hit the first time, maybe you've knocked enough of it out that you can go on, move on to the secondary target or whatever.
Mhm.
That's I guess a choice that pilots have to make if in the middle of the strike. Well, the game of yours that I'm most interested these days is because I just played Traces of Victory that you put out with Vuca.
Mhm.
How did you get involved with those guys? Because that's a series that the Traces of games had been going for a while. So
Yeah. So I didn't start there. I started with Chase of the Bismarck, which is a double-blind game.
right,
Which,
right.
yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic game. But then I saw Traces of War, and I got that, and I was really intrigued by the system. And I thought maybe this could be applied to other situations. And so, and Alsace-Lorraine, that whole campaign, I don't think has really been covered in the way that we covered it in Traces of Victory.
Yeah,
Um,
it's interesting because it's sort of like on before it you have D-Day and the sort of couple months of coming inland, and
mhm.
then we have a bunch of games on the bulge that happen just
Right,
after it. But there's that period in the middle that Traces of Victory covers, right? That
right.
the initial kind of push through Alsace and towards or into Germany, I guess.
The game is available on Vassal now. Now, there's still some issues with it that they need to work out, but it is up on Vassal.
Yeah, I play a ton of stuff via Vassal, but I played that in the physical components, and as
Mhm.
always, Vuca does just a gorgeous job
Oh,
of their
they,
production quality.
that's one of the reasons I wanted to work with them because, having been around a bit in the hobby, um, I saw the work they were doing, and I was just blown away by the quality of it and the workmanship. And working with them, there's a whole process that we're currently finishing work on Traces of the Rhine, which is Operation Grenade and Operation Veritable. So the Canadians, British are coming down from the north, and the
Yeah,
U.S. Ninth Army is crossing the Roar River,
can't wait
and
to see it.
it added some interesting features. And working with the guys, Gene in Montreal and Leonard in Sweden, Patrick in Germany, they're fantastic to work with, and we use Vassal. They put up a Vassal version of it that we use for testing, and we use an application called Trillo for communicating back and forth and making changes to every facet of the game. So, and they're very knowledgeable in terms of these actions, and so I don't mind them saying, we need to change this based on the historical. So, yeah, it's been great to work with them.
Well, I think that's the best attitude to have as a designer, is to be open to input from other people. I mean, you can say yes or no, but
Mm.
there's a few designers out there that are just like they're always like saying no, no, no to everything, and I think they don't get it as far as they might if they were
Mhm.
more open. I think I'm going to get the chance to see a prototype maybe, or a playtest copy of this maybe in Minnesota next month. I'm going to be up
Oh,
there for SD North,
okay.
and I think Patrick's going to be there, and he
Oh,
promised to
great.
bring some traces, some new something from traces. So
Well,
I
there's
thought
a
it had to be
Tu-
this.
well, there may be there's a Tunisian version of the game. I don't
Hmm.
know how far along that is. It's by I think Leonard in Sweden designed the game. So I don't know which one. But
Maybe
now
he'll bring them both.
we're moving on to Traces of Destruction, Operation Bagration, or Destruction of Army Group Center.
Right.
And yeah, that's so we're starting that, and we've got a couple of others in mind as well.
Well, I'm Canadian, so I was when I saw that the next one was going to have uh, Operation Veritable in it. My ears perked up right away and
Mhm.
thought, I might see some of our boys in it, and I guess indeed we do.
Oh yeah, that operation historically was very interesting. What they had to overcome, and having the means to do that. We have river crossings. We have Rhine bridges. There are Volk storm units. We've added, going from Traces of Victory to Traces of Rhine, adapting the system to that particular situation and what the Allies faced, and also what the Germans did. And we also have two different victory situations. In terms of occupying or destroying the German units, occupying towns, and the Germans have the option of pulling back across the Rhine before they're wiped out. So
Mm.
uh, anyway, I hope you get to see it.
Yeah, that's interesting to have asymmetric victory conditions that aren't just if you one side has to do A, and if they don't, the
Yeah.
other side wins. That's I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
The I think these victory of games or traces of games. I I I'm hoping that they catch on more and more. They really hit a sweet spot for in terms of complexity and play time. Like
Yeah.
they're not big and long, and yet there's still plenty of choices, plenty of decisions to be made, and there lots of it can be done in an evening or two.
Right. The things I focus on are playability and historical accuracy. And I don't want to take anything away from monster games, but if I was to play a monster game, I'd want an entire staff behind me. There's just too many things going on.
Right. I feel I don't know. We may be close to the same age. I don't know, but I feel like my days of monster game are behind me. I just don't. I don't have the time to or the focus to put into something that's going to take a week to play. Or you got a dog. Very nice.
Yeah. Yeah. He's
That's all right.
anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I play the occasional long game now, but I only do it via Vassal PBM because then it can just take as long as it needs, but it doesn't
Right.
have to be set up taking up a table in the
Oh yeah.
basement for months and months at a time. And
Right.
but I'm way more happy to play a game like Traces of Victory than any monster anymore. That's just I think there's a lot of games I still want to get to, and I don't want to waste all my time stuck in some
Yeah.
monster.
My other approach has been complexity. I do not want players to become lawyers or accountants in the process of playing these games, trying to interpret some dark or gray part of the rules. So,
Yeah, the rules clarity is a tricky part for sure, but the that's a skill some people seem to have and others don't in terms of writing a clear rule. The accounting part, though, I totally that's just a design thing. Some
mhm.
people, I have a friend who calls it like it's math. It's shoving and math, and what she means is just like shoving numbers around on a map board to try and
Mhm.
get the right
Mhm.
ratio of attack to defend factors. And
Right.
it's sort of it's old fashioned, and there's so many newer ways to approach it these days that that
Yeah,
are way more fun than trying to get that one more factor.
yeah. Having godlike intelligence on the, it's just not realistic. Yeah. So,
Yeah, all that stuff. I mean, that's another reason why I love chit pull games as well, because
mhm.
they they take a lot of the control out of your plan.
It increases the anxiety level for the player, which, they should, trying to guess what the next move is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that I mean, you've got a lot of design projects on the go.
Mm.
Do you still have time to play other games? You said you've met some other fellows in Portland or in Oregon now that
Oh,
you've joined up with.
um, not so much because during the summertime I also work for a minor league baseball team here. This
Ah,
single A team. We're affiliate of the Diamondbacks, and so I'm an usher, so it's not a major undertaking, but I tell people I get paid to watch baseball essentially, so that occupies at least every other week during the summer.
right. So not so much time to play. Do you? But come the winter, will you? Do you fit some gaming time in along with your designing time?
Yeah, it depends. I seem to enjoy more the designing than the playing.
Well,
So, but it depends on the game. Like when I go down to this convention in Albany, I want to sign up and see what other people are doing.
right, and just kind of
Yeah.
play whatever's going on. Will you take when you go to that? Will you take like playtest copies of anything you're working on and
Yeah,
get people to play them?
I want to take a copy of Traces of Destruction and see what kind of feedback I get there. In fact, we just tested it this past Saturday with this group I mentioned, and but I think it helps to get as many people involved and get as much feedback and see, what people are seeing or not seeing.
Yeah, I think it's always important too to for in playtesting to be as many times along in the process as you can to have new people come and look at it,
Mhm.
because people who've been playtesting it for a while, they things that they missed they will miss forever, and somebody who
Mhm.
comes in new, they've got fresh eyes and they
Yeah.
might pick up something that everybody else has been just missing forever.
Yeah. In fact, I I did see you at San Diego Histicon in 2024. You were playing Mike Smart a game of flat top, but there was a gal there that I met had an interesting approach to gaming that she didn't have the background in the history of certain actions or events. And I thought that's an interesting approach. If you're not blinded by, historical bias, what do you bring to a game?
Yeah, no, that's totally interesting. I remember that game. It wasn't actually. It's funny. It wasn't Flat Top. It was Task Force, the Vuca game,
Task
Task
force.
Force.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But we were playing Midway. Um, but that's even if you are into history, sometimes you'll play a game where it's some chunk of history that you know nothing about, and that is interesting because on the one
Mhm.
hand, you can be completely befuddled trying to figure out, well, what do I need to do? But on the other
Mhm.
hand, you're not hamstrung by
Right.
knowing what was done.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was eye opening to me to, to see that or hear that approach.
Will you be going down to San Diego in November for their annual?
I haven't decided yet. So I know that Harold has registration probably the 8th of August or something. So I'll have to make a decision by then.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you do, then I'll have a chance to see Traces of Destruction. Probably, I imagine you'll bring it with you.
So how long have you been doing this podcast?
Oh, let's see. Hmm, 4 years, something like that. 4 or 5 years,
Okay.
maybe, something like that.
Okay. So, I asked Mike Smart when I saw him, does he consider himself a game reviewer or a player or, and
Hmm.
he did not want to say he was a reviewer. I think he didn't want to get categorized that way. So what would you say? What would you say your role is?
Um, yeah, it's funny because I just had this conversation with some folks online recently, and um, uh, the thing I don't like to be called is a content creator. I
Oh,
find that a pretty bland. I think mostly I'm just a podcaster, so I sort of feel like my role is uh, helping people find new games to play,
hmm
helping people figure out games that they maybe had problems with and stuff like that. I only review every very rarely. I'd rather do I do big pieces on games, but I call it an overview instead. I go through how it works. I talk about things I like and I don't like, but I don't. I often hesitate to come down on the end and say, "Oh, I give this 3 out of 4 stars" or some sort of final
hmm
judgment like that.
hmm
I think there's a lot of games that I like that others won't, and there's a lot of games that I don't like that others probably will.
mm Okay. Well, I'm sure when you see Patrick, was it next month? Is it?
Yeah, next month. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah. Give him some comments about the color scheme used in Traces of Victory.
I, I, I did. He already wrote me back, and
He did.
he did.
Okay.
He said, okay, we'll try to do better. And then he sent me a screenshot of what I think is some counters from uh, Traces of the Rhine, and said,
hmm
"Hey, do these look better?" And I said, "Yeah, I think these are probably some
Yeah,
better choices." Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So one
yeah.
of the other.
It's not like I never make a criticism. That's not the case for sure.
Oh, I mean, I think it's very good. I mean, if people are, they should be willing to, hear the people spend money and put money on this stuff. They buy a seat, to provide feedback.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And uh, uh, well, different publishers take it different ways, but yeah,
hmm
Patrick takes it the way that in the spirit it was intended, which is just like, oh, a customer had a problem with this. How can we make it better? Uh,
hmm
or should we make it better? Like a publisher can take the feedback and go, yeah, I think maybe it was just that guy,
hmm
or they can look at it and go, yeah, maybe maybe he's onto something. Maybe other people have the same issue. So, yeah, I think Patrick's a really open-minded publisher.
Oh yeah, and in fact, if you go on Board Game Geek and you go to Traces of Victory, Patrick responds to some of the questions. I mean,
Yeah,
he's backing his product. So yeah,
yeah, absolutely. I've got another game of theirs that I'm looking at right now that's about to come out. That's called The Far Seas, a remake of an old S&T game,
right, right.
and and I had a question about it. Not a big one, just sort of like everything was going smooth, and then I had this one little thing I couldn't figure out, and then I just sent an email off to Patrick. He'll respond. He's great that way.
hmm
Yeah, you must be happy to be working with those guys. Well,
Oh yeah.
I guess I think we've covered all the games. Is there anything else up your sleeve that you haven't placed with a publisher or that you're
No,
dreaming of?
no, not at. Well, um, I want to do the Battle of the Philippine Sea differently. It's been done in a number of ways, but the systems that people come up with are so complex, and I want to make a version of that based on the. And I've already broached the topic with Patrick, based on the Chase of the Bismarck system, that we would apply it to that action. And you know, Patrick, like any game company, it's not only a choice of, whether or not to do a game, but how's it fit in the product line and where's the timing? When do you want to release it? You don't want to release 3 games on the Battle of the Bulge or Normandy at
Right.
the same time. So um, um, I just think that was a really interesting action. The Japanese lost 3 carriers, but 2 of them were sunk by submarines, not by aircraft. So.
Right. Whenever anybody wants to tackle Pacific carrier battles or I mean, yeah, carrier battles for the most part.
Mhm.
I'm always like I'm always interested to see how they're going to do it because the problem of hidden information is such a big one in those games, and
Yeah,
finding the other guy before he sees you, so that you can launch your strike
right.
before he can get his cap in the air or whatever's going to happen. There's been so many different ways to try and
Yeah.
tackle that problem, but I'm always interested in the next one.
Well, that's why I think a double blind system would apply to this, So,
Well,
yeah.
I do have the Chase of the Bismarck game. I just haven't had
It's
time to get
it's
it.
it's a massive game. I mean, you're tracking the fuel for your individual ships and so
Right.
forth, and air reconnaissance. And I played it once against an opponent, and I managed to get the Bismarck back to Norway because I sacrificed the Prince Eugen.
Ah,
Uh, yeah, but I mean, it was a really interesting game.
well, and it's a big game too.
Oh
I
yeah.
bought it off the shelf at my local game store, and it had a dented copy, so I got $25 off. So
Oh,
that made it
excellent.
a bit yeah, because a dented corner won't bother me at all.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to ask you about, so the change in the hobby over the last, say, 10 or 20 years. Now we're seeing these games that cost well over $100. When, back at the beginning, you could buy something maybe for 12 or $20. It's
Yep.
just, uh, and I realize they're more sophisticated, there's more production involved, and inflation. But I just wonder where the hobby's going, if this is a trend.
Uh, yeah, no, I think you make a good point because yeah, when I started, games were $12 to $18 Canadian, right? So that at the
Mhm.
time it was like uh, uh, eight to $15 American, whatever. And that was that for a kid that was still a lot of money, but it wasn't a ton of money. You could buy a game every couple of months if you wanted to,
Mhm.
but when games are $80 US and like you say, 120. What I wonder about is how do you attract young people if the price point is kind of aimed at aging boomers? You
Mhm.
know, the price point of these games is mostly stuff that retired people or older people are more likely to be able to afford. I saw a game. A game's coming out in this year, I think. Um, that the suggested retail price on it is $300 US, and I thought,
Yeah.
how like who the hell's going to buy that thing?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, by the way, Traces of Victory is sold out in the United States, so they're going to reprint that game.
Oh, yeah, good to know. It deserves
Yeah.
it deserves to stay in print.
Uh, One thing, when I was at SD Histicon, there was a panel, and one of the questions came up is, how do you price games? And I thought, if you're going to spend an evening playing a game, what if you were to go out to a movie, go to a baseball game, go to a soccer game? How much would you spend that evening, to do that? Well, if you could spend $80 on a game that you would keep as an alternative, why not price it at 80 to $100?
Yeah,
It's an alternative.
yeah, absolutely. $100 for a pair of baseball tickets is a one night event, whereas a
Hmm.
game, if it's a good game, gets played and played and played. And so
Hmm.
I totally get it in that from that perspective. I also get it. I tend to bristle when people talk about the price of games being strictly related to the quality and the quantity of components. That
Mm.
I always think if that's all somebody's focused on when they're complaining about a price, they're really underestimating the designer and the graphic designer and everything else that went in. Like
Hmm.
you're not just paying for the maps and the counters. You're paying for the lifetime of being interested in history and the hours and hours and hours of thought that went into creating the game. It's not just the cardboard.
Hmm. One of the things that I'm not into this to make a fortune or make money off of it. I just hope people will enjoy and learn from the games that I've worked on. So I'd be very satisfied with that.
Yeah, I don't think many people. Well, it's a funny hobby because it sort of feels like 80% of the designers, it's a part-time thing for them, and for
Mhm.
those of us who are sort of on the media side of things, for all of us, it's just a part-time. It's just like a hobby as well. Nobody gets rich podcasting, or
Right,
it's like
right.
so. It's kind of like we're all doing this together, and um,
Mm.
I guess the game companies make a bit of money, enough to keep in
Mm.
business, but they're not off in their yachts on the weekends or anything like that
Yeah,
either.
yeah,
And a
yeah.
lot of the game companies are just, like some of my favorite companies are just tiny two-man shops or one-man shop.
Mm.
Like uh, I mean, Patrick is basically a two-man shop, I think, unless he's expanded a bit since last time I talked to him about it.
So I got a Christmas card from them, and it was signed by 4 or 5 people. So I
Oh,
figure they're all in
so
the
good.
office there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's getting bigger. Well, good.
yeah,
That's good. I'm glad it's
yeah,
all.
yeah.
I'm glad it's all happening. Well, I think that's all I have, Al. Unless you have
Okay.
anything else,
Um,
I was
no, we're
very
good.
pleased to meet you. Yeah, and I hope I run into you down in San Diego, or if I ever get down to that Oregon convention. I'm
Okay.
always happy to go back to Oregon. It's a great state. Portland's a great
Uh,
city.
uh, it's beautiful weather, so I'll say that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely.
well, again, it's been good talking to you. Let me know if you need anything else.
You bet. I didn't realize until after I played his first game that Al was such a great contributor to War Diary magazine. It turns out I'd read tons of his stuff already without really putting two and two together. I don't subscribe to World at War, but apparently writes for them as well. So I might have to start reading that too. Parting shots. I'm a great fan of Mark Johnson's War Games to Go podcast. I listened to it long before I started my own, and it inspired me to take care with things like sound quality and clarity, on top of striving for the same coherence and eloquence that Mark demonstrates. His most recent episode was one on post war Germany, inspired by the excellent game Wir sind das Volk. Excellent episode. Listen to it right after you listen to this if you haven't already. Mark's episodes are split between talking about games and talking about the history depicted in those games. Near the end of the recent episode, Mark was talking about CDGs and how much he loves the way you can often either shuffle the cards and have the events play out in any order, or put the cards in order and have the events play out in historically correct chronological order. A great possible history lesson, until he added the caveat that in most CDGs, the player has the option of using the event or the ops points. So not all the historical events are going to happen, making things roll out not quite the same as history after all. He was quick to say he wasn't interested in alt history events, things that possibly could have happened, but wondered about how to repair the problem of getting all the events to happen. Anyway, in general, I'm with him on that last part about the alt history. I have little interest in the big alt history stuff like what if Hitler invaded America, stuff like that. However, it's kind of a fine distinction. It's really just a matter of where you draw the line. As Mark Herman has said, as soon as you make the first move in a war game, you're basically playing alt history. Very true. We generally start the game from a historically correct spot in terms of geography and orders of battle, but then we make our own moves. Perhaps reinforcements come at preset historically correct times, or maybe they're random. Still, somehow that usually still feels historical to me in a way that the wider alt history stuff doesn't. So Mark and I are much on the same page. However, I started thinking about him not wanting any events in a CDG that didn't actually happen. And I think there might be a bit of faulty logic at work here. There are many things that happened that were extremely unlikely, low odds events that happened. As an example, think of Lost Orders 191 in the US Civil War. General Lee's movement orders were found by a Union soldier. They were wrapped around some cigars in a vacated camp spot. The info they provided led directly to the Union victory at Antietam. Of course, the Union troops were commanded by McClellan, so the victory might have been even greater in the hands of a less cautious general. Anyway, but the point is, what are the chances of a copy of the orders being lost? There were only a handful of paper copies. Very strange for a general to lose his or throw them away. And these orders having been lost, what are the chances of a Union soldier finding them? See, my point is, if we're doing a Civil War CDG, we would very likely include this event. It's very important in the history of the war, even though the odds of it actually happening were extremely small. On the other hand, there must be hundreds of examples of more likely events that just never happened. Leaders who were given good advice that they ignored that would have changed their plans had it been heeded, attacks that were called off due to possible bad weather. I'd wager there are tons of events that didn't happen that were way more likely to have happened than something like Lost Orders 191. So maybe it's worthwhile to add in events that didn't happen, but they were likely to have happened. Death in the trenches. It has hundreds of events, some that happened, some that didn't. The ones that didn't are generally given a low chance of happening, like rolling boxcars or the like, but they still can happen, and they change a little bit the course of World War One. Like I said, there's a fine distinction that I think most gamers make when it comes to how far off the course of history they'll tolerate. On the one hand, we have games that almost run on rails and don't permit much, and then on the other hand, we have sandboxes that set us up with the starting orders of battle, and then everything else is up to us. I probably personally lean a little more to the sandbox side, but I'm pretty wide open to with what I'll tolerate. The only time I really get bored is if a game is so on the rails that I don't feel like I'm making meaningful decisions. In that case, I'd just rather read a book. Okay. Thanks again to all the Pushing Cardboard supporters, whether it's by becoming Ko-Fi patrons or buying swag. If you do want to become a supporter, there's links on the website in the newsletter. There's also affiliate links for Cube for Me and Noble Knight Games. Also, for every episode, there's a survey on the website or in the newsletter. You can launch it right from the link in the show notes on your phone or the newsletter. Check it out. I'm always interested in your feedback. Or just look for me on the Pushing Cardboard Discord server and let's talk some war games. Until next time, enjoy the World Cup. Canada has just beat South Africa to advance to the round of 16, our best ever result. As hockey becomes increasingly more expensive, it's good to see we're working on our fallback. Talk to you next time.